anyone.
Night. Um, that way you guys have a little bit of reference to go off of um, with this program. I would encourage you guys not to write on my screen. But throughout the week, we're going to dive into several different organizations. I want to give you an awareness in this program of how powerful Lean Six Sigma is. So if you guys would follow us on our LinkedIn page, I'll give you guys about another minute before we move on to the next slide and kick off class. I've also given you the student file material to download. You will download this in your onto your computer. So as I kind of discussed that, I'm an international trainer. I write the body of knowledge for Lean Six Sigma. And my goal is to give you a practical approach to how to apply these things. I don't get so far in the winds where we get lost statistically. A lot of Lean Six Sigma comes around from project management and being aware of statistical analysis and how to combine the two to look at data for how we can improve an organization. I've taught in a variety of different programs. I've taught from Walmart. I've taught for Amazon. I actually helped create the workforce program at the Ford battery plant. And so I am a master black belt facilitator. And this program has reached over 800,000 students with confirming in a survey, not everybody, paid attention to the survey, but out of the 800,000, 75,000 or 72,000 responded back to the survey, and they're all in careers within 6 months over 85K. Now, that to me is very, very impressive statistics. That means that the training you guys are about to go through is helping you guys land jobs in the industry. I love the military. I love being a part of it, and I'm a volunteer for this program. So throughout the week, I ask you guys to ask questions, be involved. This isn't like a class where you just sit on the webcam and you just don't do anything. We're going to be applying these skills of Lean Six Sigma that you can directly use on your job tomorrow.
Wondering what the real value of a STAR Global College certification is? Let's break it down. At STAR Global College, your certification isn't just a piece of paper. It's a launchpad for your career. Live instructor-led certifications from world-renowned industry experts, global networking with professionals in tech, business, healthcare, and more. Real results. Most of our students report landing jobs within 90 days, and the numbers back it up. Graduates report better opportunities, stronger skill sets, and employer recognition across the board. Ready to turn your potential into a paycheck? Enroll at Star Global College and level up your future.
And I have some great people that work with us to help out this mission. So throughout this week, we're going to cover the body of knowledge for black belt, green belt, and yellow belt, right? Um, and on Saturday, if the students are interested, we'll go and enroll in the master black belt training, and that takes about 4 hours on Saturday in combination with this. Um, this doesn't make you a facilitator, but a master black belt, I'll go into the difference. But a lot of the times, I became a master black belt in 2017, and one of the things that it sets apart from the black belt and green belt and yellow belt is you really learn about executive change. How do you go into an organization and change the culture for continuous improvement? Black belts, they're strategic leaders. And throughout this class this week, Monday through Friday, we're going to talk about how to develop an organization and plan for strategic change and how to guide change throughout the organization in a way where you're talking with the frontline worker and applying it all the way up to the CEO level. Green belts focus on the projects at hand, right? They're kind of all about small unit leadership, right? And yellow belts, they're typically just the worker bees that collect data for these higher belt levels. That's kind of an overarching overview, but I'm going to go into it a little bit more when we go through the slides throughout the week. Typically, Lean Six Sigma is a very profitable career, right? Uh, you'll have consultants that are in the black belt range that are making well over 90K a year. As a master black belt in my first year as a master black belt, I was teaching for the community college, and I would do workforce training in industries. So I would actually go into the industry and teach. And at that time I was only making like 43,000 a year, right? And I kept getting jobs in these industries, and I kept traveling all across the world, just through connections that I had in the industry. And I think as my master black belt really evolved my strategy in teaching and coaching and guiding teams, I was well over 200K in 6 months. So I wound up leaving the community college and I went into economic development. And I'll talk about that throughout the week. In that role, I helped relocate Mr. Beast to his location. I also helped relocate companies, and I would look at their plant to make sure they're optimizing the best workforce strategy and preparing their employees. So as a black belt, this is one of the rarest programs out there because I'm going to give you a holistic approach to Lean Six Sigma. I'm not just going to talk about one area, healthcare or manufacturing. I'm going to talk about all these different realms, and because I've worked in it and I've applied projects all over the country. We've worked in manufacturing, pharmaceutical, banking, hospitality. Um, what's another one we worked at? Uh, I've even worked in government DoD sectors as well to enhance operations. Um, One of the proudest moments that I've had with here, and like I said, is we're connecting the training and not just helping you get the certification, but connecting you to the jobs that pay this, right? And so, if you're coming in the military realm and you're like, I'm just doing this for promotion in the military, that's okay. Like I respect that, but I don't think the military is paying these salaries, right? So I want to kind of guide you to the civilian sector, and not excluding anybody that's not in the military or anything like that. Not trying to exclude you, just sharing what my passion is helping you guys land jobs in the industry. This program is significantly cheaper compared to other programs. Black belt training is typically a couple grand. Over at Villanova University, they charge $4,000 for this exact program that you're going through. And the end of this week, you'll cover under the scholarship to offset the cost, and you'll register for your exam at the end of the week. There will be a transcript that you guys will get for your black belt that will go through and it'll document what you've learned during the week. And so when you're applying to jobs, you can bring it. But this also is transferable to college and college credit. It usually covers like lower level, like quality management classes or like 4,000 level classes. But I've seen it be approved in grad school. That's typically just depending on what program the students are applying for. So you'll get the added benefit of a transcript, the black belt. And then one of the added benefits of this program that is new, well, new-ish, is you guys are accredited by the Council of Professional Development, an international standard for Lean Six Sigma. Now, I have a background in American Society Equality. I've also taught for the ISSAC. I've also taught for the Council of Six Sigma. So you're getting a blend of all these credentials and accreditations into this program. So when you turn in this transcript and the certification, this can go in your I don't know, I can't remember what the military called it, like your service record, like, but they call it like OMPF or something. Some you guys might call it something else there in the branch. Your promotion packets, things like that. So it transfers over, and that way you can get credit for it. If you're in the Navy and you're doing this for an NEC, you may have an additional requirement that the Navy may have, but for the most part, this covers a lot of the curriculum basis to get your NEC approved. So, yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a certified industry trainer. I have 15 years experience in industry leading. I hope nobody holds it against me, but I'm also a Marine Corps veteran. I got out in 2012 and I kind of fell on my face if you look at the bottom left. And when I graduated my undergrad, um, I went through and I was able to really enhance my own life using Lean Six Sigma. You know, I was able to kind of understand, hey, I'm struggling with PTSD. I'm struggling with these issues. Um, and so I took a little break and I focused on myself and healing those wounds. And then all of a sudden, I get this phone call from USA Today when I graduated, and they wanted to interview me. Well, what did I do? I thought it was one of my Marine buddies messing with me, so I kept hanging up on the lady. And then after a couple weeks, I finally realized that it was USA Today calling me and wanting to do a national article. Boom, I'm all of a sudden propelled into traveling around the country and working with veterans on workforce development. How do you get a career in the industry? And I specialize in change management methodology. Um, I have a PhD in organizational leadership, and I'm finishing my second doctorate at Walden University, and I'm getting a doctorate of business administration with a focus on leadership. Uh, I, I'm trying to I'm trying to get the college to change it to leadership and change management. We'll see. But regardless, my passion is showing you guys how to apply these skills in the real world, and it has significant tangible results. One of my favorite things that I've done, I had talked about working with Fayetteville Tech, and we've been able to do a lot of cool things over at Fort Bragg. And one of my last industry projects that I just did probably about 3 months ago is I worked with Texas Instruments down in Austin, Texas. So I'm going to apply these concepts to the training so you guys can see real world, like, hey, how does this connect into an industry? The Lean Six Sigma methodology is a great program, right? It has revolutionized organizations, and I'll go into the history about it here in a little bit. But my own personal experience with this, we'll talk about leaders that are pivotal in this, like such as Henry Ford, Edward Deming. I'm actually trained by an instructor that worked under Edward Deming. So you're going to see his philosophy in this. You're also going to see, and this is where it's kind of tainted a little bit because I'm certified in Scrum, certified in project management, certified in SAFe. So I'm trying to give you a holistic view of this. Lean Six Sigma Black Belt isn't where you stop. Some students will come in, they'll get their Lean Six Sigma program, um, check that box, and they won't come to these other programs that we have to offer. Our programs around the world, our whole, we have things in ISO quality management to industrial safety and health ISO, so ISO 45001. We just taught a seminar last night and certified students around the world. Most of our students that are leaving this program that go through these different certifications, they're making well over 160K a year. And that's documented. And that's probably one of the coolest things. My favorite thing is when I first started this, and I teach in the industry, and then I would teach online, and then that's where I started the academy. And about 2 years ago, we got recognized as a college of workforce development. On Tuesday, this is so dope. On Tuesday, we hit 1,000,003 students. Tell me that's not super cool. So I'm going to bring a lot of my professional experience into this class for you guys. Another cool thing that I've been able to do is I author books and I publish it. This was my first book. It's called Leadership Don't Mean Shit. It's about the frameworks of leadership and how corporate America kind of dumbed down leadership, and they don't really give a good approach to it. Even the military. A lot of us, how did we learn how to lead? Trial by what? Trial by fire, right? Mistakes were made and we learned from it, right? Well, in this book, I talk a lot about that. I am, I also authored a book called The Lean Six Sigma Champion. And by the way, I'm going to give that shit to you guys for free. So you'll also get your champion certification if you guys are cool with that. Everybody cool with that? Um, so in this, I talk about how do you lead organizational change from that champion level. Um, I'll give you guys like a seminar link, and you can register and get your champion certification for free. Okay, you guys cool with that? Is that okay for you guys? All right. My latest two books. This is probably what's going to directly reference to you guys. Is ISO 9001, which is quality management systems. Um, and we've been offering this program for the last couple weeks, but I just got this published book. I got this book published last Monday. So we have this is like the facilitator guide. So if you guys ever come back, I will train you to be facilitators in quality management systems. This directly applies to your Lean Six Sigma. If you have your Lean Six Sigma black belt and your ISO 9001 quality management systems facilitator, that way you can go into an organization and audit where their quality defects are. This also talks about my time. One of my very first careers, as I got out of the military, I started as a car salesman, and then I realized, like, hey, I don't want to work like 100 and something hours a week for shitty pay. So I went to college, and then I got wrapped up with being a quality engineer for Honda. So I directly applied, and I got my green belt with Honda. And then I was like, oh, I got a knack for training this. And then I got my black belt. And then in 2017, after a couple projects, I got my master black belt. And all of a sudden, I start becoming a world-renowned expert and trainer in this. And I teach and I coach in seminars. And, basically during the day, I'm doing industry training around the world. So a lot of the quality management aspects is throughout different organizations around the world. My latest book was published Friday. This is ISO 45001, which is health and safety. We just did the first seminar yesterday, certified about 25 students in there. But this is where I say it's very powerful to learn all about these different educations. The course and the training, our instructors teach it. You want to get registered in it, this is the best thing for your opportunity. Just like you guys coming here and learning about Lean Six Sigma and getting certified in it, the ones that invest in themselves are the ones that are not on the unemployment line. Can I get an amen? Most people, uh, you know, when you're transitioning out, the world is not going to cater to you. You need to have, if you want to go land these six-figure jobs, you have to invest in yourself. Knowledge is going to be super powerful here. And I share that because there's a lot of programs out there that are not worth a damn, and they're sending veterans to them, praising them, but they're not leading to completion rates. They're not leading to jobs. And that's one of the proudest things that I love about this. And I love seeing it when you guys get your job in the industry. Throughout the week, my expectations for you guys, we're going to be in class from 7 to like 10:30, 11-ish each night this week. Uh, if you can't show up to this, how can you show up to a job? I say this because I have industries that reach out to me and ask for candidates to go into the industry. So if I remember your name and if I remember you in the Lean Six Sigma class or these other programs, I typically ask for your resume and I send it up. I've done almost 72 people directly like that, to kind of get a shoe in with the industry. One of my proudest students that I met him years back. He now is the director of training for Amazon, and he makes well over 172,000 a year. And I directly pieced him together from this Lean Six Sigma class that you guys are sitting in directly. So take it seriously. You're learning some advanced things to be able to change your life. Some of you, this is maybe your first experience or exposure to Lean Six Sigma. So in this boot camp that I kind of get you guys to go through, it's designed to help understand Lean Six Sigma methodology, but apply it in a practical sense. It's Lean Six Sigma. You're going to be working with people that don't have the same education level as you do, that don't have a master's or a bachelor's. You're going to be working with frontline workers, and I want to show you how you coach and guide them because it's a little bit different. You can't overwhelm them with data or statistics. You got to have visual aids. You got to have a common sense approach to leadership. Um, and I'll share a lot about and I'll be vulnerable with you guys a lot about my struggles, where I've screwed up in projects. I've had projects fail just because I was young and inexperienced and I was trying to hit everything and ask all the questions, not the important ones. And throughout time, I learned how to coach and guide executives.
Welcome to Star Global College's flagship program, our Lean Six Sigma certification course, where over 97% of students gain employment within 3 months. This program is recognized by thousands of organizations worldwide and is designed to align with most industry and academic curricula, making it the perfect bridge between education and high-performance careers. Whether you're breaking into operations, quality control, healthcare, logistics, or leadership, Lean Six Sigma gives you the tools to solve problems, drive efficiency, and deliver measurable results. We don't just teach theory. We help you lead with confidence. Join the global movement and launch your next chapter with Star Global College.
Like I said, I got some awesome people that do a lot of stuff to help me out. So this is the Lean Six Sigma Black Belt course. We're going to go through the entire curriculum of Lean Six Sigma. If you would open up your boot camp materials. Under the material link, go to Body of Knowledge and open up that Black Belt tab. We're going to go through the entire touch points of the Black Belt. I'm going to tell you, hey, this is what you really need to focus on. Um, and there's going to be some statistics that we go through where I'm like, hey, man, look, I'm going to show you a different way of using these statistics, but this is relevant, but it's more like, hey, just have an awareness of it. Chances are none of you are going to be doing an ANOVA analysis. None of you will be doing a t-test. I've done t-test in a lot of my projects around the country, but most of it has just been like, hey, did we make a change, and showing it graphically instead of showing it statistically. Um, so this is a really good opportunity for you guys to develop yourselves. I can't tell you the number of people that have come to this program and then all of a sudden this is what they want to do as a career. They want to do consulting. They want to guide organizational change. That's awesome. As a practitioner of Lean Six Sigma, you're going to be guiding organizations to driving the culture and that organization for the better. So throughout tonight's session, we'll break up the DMAIC system into nightly events. So tonight we would cover basically going into the yellow belt methodology and green belt. And then, throughout the week, it's kind of blended with the black belt methodology. But tonight, our focus is going to be the introduction, understanding what Lean and Six Sigma is, understanding how they apply to the voice of the customer. I'll give you history of Lean Six Sigma from the from Henry Ford to the Toyota management system, all the way to Bill Smith at Motorola and beyond 2020, where Lean Six Sigma really applies today and how we're using advancements in artificial intelligence to help us. After that, we're going to go into some of the defined phase tools tonight. We may not get to a project charter. We'll just see where we are tonight. But anything that isn't finished the following night, we'll carry on into the next day. There really won't be many take-home activities. Like I might ask you to research a company or little things like that. Most of what we're going to do is going to be in this 7 to 11 format. Um, I have some modules for you guys to do if you choose to. Like let's say you want to get your yellow belt. I'm going to give you the yellow belt module to just take on the side. You'll see a lot of similarities between that and this, but that gets a little bit more on the basic level where I'm more looking at how do we be black belts in an organization. We'll talk about in the tool phase, I'll talk about what are some critical to quality metrics. What's a Kano analysis? What's a project charter? And we'll create a baseline for continuous improvement activities. That project charter is probably one of the most important pieces of the define phase. But when you tag that along with the VOC, understanding what's quality to the customer, understanding what's critical to quality, and then how um, Lean Six Sigma has evolved throughout the last 100 years. Even though it wasn't called Lean Six Sigma until the late 80s, all Lean Six Sigma is a set of managerial practices that lead to process optimization. So what is Lean Six Sigma? Like I said, Lean Six Sigma is a best practices of managerial business practices. So, we'll look at reducing defects in an organization. We'll look at enhancing the operation. And since I have more of a workforce development history, and like that's where my career has been the last 10, 12 years, I'm going to add that piece into how Lean Six Sigma goes out and leads project teams. We talk about Lean and Six Sigma being the same thing. They're actually two different ideologies, but they complement each other very well. Where you have Lean, which focuses on speed in the organization and kind of cutting out the waste that gets in our way. And then you have Six Sigma, which is using statistical analysis to understand your process, looking at your historical data, and looking at where we can improve to reduce quality or to improve quality, to reduce defects, and improve customer satisfaction. Why do we need Lean Six Sigma? At the end of the day, our organizations should be giving our customer the best quality. Fun fact, you're going to find out that American companies have a huge problem with quality defects. Can anybody kind of answer this? And we'll get more into it as we go through, but kind of like a surface level, why do you think American companies have such a huge problem with quality?
Probably because everything is like time based in a sense. Like everyone's rushing to kind of get everything out the way. Nobody's kind of doing checks and balances along the way.
Absolutely. Dude, 100%. Do you know most companies that are, I've spent a lot of time with manufacturers. A lot of manufacturers have such a huge problem with turnover rate because they can't find candidates. They'll hire. Does anybody know what a temp worker is? Can somebody tell me what a temp worker is? Essentially, a
Yes.
temp. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh no, a temp. well, my take on temporary worker is just someone is hired in a temporary status, meaning they're not full time. They're just taking the place of, I guess, less pay for a full time employee, possibly.
Yeah. So what temp workers do, right? And they'll have temp agencies that will essentially assume all the liability for the company, like they'll take care of their health care, things like that. And then the companies will pay that agency to outsource and find these people. But what you find, I've worked with several companies, and where I am, I have Grady White, I have Heister Yale, I have pharmaceuticals, I have the National Hospital here. But you'll find out, and this is where you guys may think I'm an asshole, and I'm not. I'm just kind of telling you the truth. A lot of times people can't find jobs because they are not job ready. They'll they're kind of a lot of times the bottom of the barrel for employment. But what companies will do is they'll try to get them into the manufacturing realm and on the assembly line. Well, if you have somebody that barely has a high school education and you throw them in a manufacturing realm where they don't really understand quality, they don't understand manufacturing, they don't understand how to work with people, they have a lot of soft skills issues in the organization. And what's interesting about that is the quality and turnover. I like Grady White down here, they have a 47% turnover rate in 3 months. When they hire somebody, there's a 47% chance they're bringing on somebody different. I don't want to like attack temp workers, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm telling you the truth. Companies that invest in their employees, they invest in training them, onboarding them properly, giving them the resources they need to succeed. That's where you're going to see the best quality. And I forgot who had mentioned it, but we are on a time thing. We need to push product out. Well, if we just put a band-aid on the process and we don't understand and we don't analyze the root cause of it, it's funny because if you it's like a machine, right? If you don't schedule maintenance or PMCS for that machine, guess what? It's going to schedule it for you at the most inconvenient time. So a lot of times we need to look at quality as the best possible process that we can give our customer. Because if you don't give your customer the best quality product, on-time delivery, or even the best customer satisfaction, they're going to go somewhere else. They're not going to be loyal to your organization. We see quality defects a lot in American organizations because our culture is not as sophisticated as like Japan, right? And what do I mean by that? They're raised from an early age that you're going to be working in the workforce. You're going to be, contributing to society. I like to think that American does have that as well, but they're just not, there's a disconnect. And I'll talk about my time in Honda to kind of elaborate a little bit on with it. In a true Six Sigma process, you should have 99.9997% quality with only a 0.000034% defect rate. And when we get more into our statistics night, I'll elaborate a little bit more. But in America, we had in the late 70s, we had an oil crisis, right? And 1 out of 4 American-made automobiles had some type of quality defect. Well, you started to see the shift from American bought to all of a sudden we're buying Toyotas, we're buying Hondas, we're buying the cheaper vehicle but better quality. And so we had a huge revolution in the last 30 years in America on focusing on quality. I worked with a company down here. They're Asmo, and they manufacture like windshield wipers. Um, and they wound up closing down because they had issues with quality. They lost their ISO certification. And ISO is the International Standards Organization that basically is like it's a set of standards that you need to ship your product. And if you don't have that ISO certification, your customers, a lot of times vendors won't work with you. And The ways you lose it is when you have shitty quality in your process. So we want to focus on quality as a way of enhancing that customer experience. Lean Six Sigma reduces cost. I've had projects that have been uh, really innovative. One of my very first projects, I worked with a company called Flanders. I was on doing my green belt, and I was doing, they basically manufactured, like in your house, you have those filters that go in your AC unit. You guys know what I'm talking about? They're like little boxes, right? Well, that process had a lot of waste in it. And so basically it would run it through the process. They would they would smash up the glass and then they would turn it into the fabric or the filtration and they would stretch it, run it through a machine, cut out the box for the AC. I'm pointing over here because my AC unit's like right there. But they cut out the box and then the rest of it was scrap. They would have over 90,000 square feet a day of waste. We were asked to come in to see if we could reduce the waste. And we found out we really couldn't because it was a part of the process. Once it's cut and, basically you can't, just glue together pieces, the filtration wouldn't work. But we found a really cool alternative to add revenue back. They weren't able to cut out the waste, but we were able to ship that company all that excess filtration, the material. We found a company in Ohio that was an environmental specialist, and they would build artificial reefs off the coast of Colorado, not Colorado, California, and they would clean it, they would filter it, do whatever they need to do for the ecosystem, and then they would build coral reefs out of it. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think my first Lean Six Sigma project would be helping the aquatic life in California. They bought it from Flanders. Flanders has since been like dismissed. They got bought out by another company. But they were able to produce a revenue off that 90,000 square feet of $165,000 a year going back to the organization. That was just my first project. Oftentimes, you'll find out that life happens in the gray area. And I'm not saying like, hey, go do some shady shit. That's not what I'm saying. That, you have right or wrong, but for us to succeed in organizations, we have to be creative. We have to be innovative. We have to look at our process and say we can do better. That may not be in the black or white thinking spot. That's where we have to be innovative and creative. The best Lean Six Sigma practitioners are the ones that know that know, hey, we have this process. It's messed up. What's the old phrase? If it's not broke, what? Don't fix it. I couldn't tell you how many times I heard that throughout my career. Those executives that said that, guess what? They're on the unemployment line. Their plants have closed down. It's just truth. You need to be innovative and creative to solve real world industry problems. Productivity enhancement. Lean Six Sigma develops that culture for standardization and optimization, but it also pieces together where ergonomics come into play. Does anybody know what ergonomics is? Can somebody tell me what ergonomics is? What is ergonomics, guys?
I think people are putting the answers in the chat. Uh,
I don't see anything. I just see positioning. Let me hear from you guys. What is ergonomics?
Well, I'm be honest. I don't know that one. I don't know about anybody else.
Okay, that's okay. If you don't know it, just say you don't know it. Don't just ignore my question. The 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 thing here, if you go to an employer and they say, "Hey, do you know this?" Just be honest with them. I don't know this. Ergonomics is fitting the worker to the work. You think in like 1920s, right? What were we going through in the late 1920s, guys?
The depression.
The Great Depression, right? Um, and essentially workers were lined up all out the door to find a job. They had a standard way of doing things, and they based a lot of ideology off of Henry Ford and his production of the Model T. Well, we find out in the late 50s, like 40s and 50s, we start analyzing human behavior and we start asking questions to workers about how they feel in the workplace. What can we do better? What would help you be more efficient? It's mind-boggling. It took us until 1950s to do the Hawthorne studies where they were in Illinois at the electric company and they were asking people these things. All of a sudden, productivity increased. All of a sudden, defects went down because we started to go at that frontline worker and say, what do you need and what obstacles are in your way? If you ask me what a leader is, it's not someone that brags about their rank or brags about, oh, I'm a leader in this. Here's the honest truth. You can't call yourself a leader unless you bring other people up. Would anybody argue that?
I think the statement is valid. I feel like the people under you are a reflection of your leadership.
Exactly. And and so I want to share that with you, and that's where productivity starts increasing. And I've worked a lot of Lean Six Sigma projects where ergonomics came into play, and carpal tunnel, days missed, near misses, and I'll share as we go through. I'll talk about my time in different industries and how we use Lean Six Sigma to improve productivity. It gives us the competitive advantage. And there's one word that I want you guys to write down, benchmarking. Right? If I'm a Walmart, who's my competitor? I got several, but for this scenario, Walmart and Target. Is there some things that Target does better than Walmart does?
Yes. And same thing, vice versa, in a sense.
Yeah, Walmart, they are, if you study supply chains, they kind of set the golden standard before Amazon for shipping product and having massive influx of logistics, right? And they were meeting customer demands. Well, Walmart's model became outdated with the invention of the internet, and then Amazon came along. Well, Walmart kind of stepped up their game, but then Target also is that competitor. Benchmarking essentially is we're looking at our competitor and we're understanding what we could do better. If you use benchmarking for your own like resume and you're applying for jobs, there are so many people out there applying for a job. My last job that I applied for and I just interviewed for was the director of change management for Warner Brothers Studio. There were almost 500 people that applied for that job. So like, even if I'm still in the process, but even if I don't get it, like that's still super dope to get recognized by an agency like that, right? Like obviously I'm on top of my game, but that wasn't always the case. When I was coming out of college, when I was coming out of my undergrad, I hit the job market and then all of a sudden I realized just because I have a degree, that's not going to land me the job. You see now more in America, the degrees aren't just cutting it in the workforce. And you start to see that programs like this, continuing education courses, programs that are specifically designed for workforce enhancement, that's what companies are looking for. I can guarantee you're going to have a better percentage chance of landing a job if you have a Lean Six Sigma background and a certification. I would say a 90% more likelihood of being interviewed because we focus on competitive advantages. And just like I focused on what do I need to add to my resume to be competitive in the market, I can look at how Walmart is competitive with Target. Target is based around what? The customer, right? Walmart is too, but more or less Walmart's about getting the product there and under the right cost, where Target really focuses on the experience, right? You got a Starbucks, you got like all kinds of little vendors there. And you know, they're designed where they take care of their shopping carts. I can't tell you how many shopping carts were screwed up at Walmart, but that's just like one little step in the puzzle. You're not going to get a job if you don't do some type of benchmarking. If you don't look at yourself and say, okay, these are the areas I can improve on. And this is the beauty of this class is I'm going to introduce you to Excel. I'm going to introduce you to how do you present. And the the thing I want to tell you, it's okay to fail here. Failure, failing itself stands for first attempt at learning. You're not always going to be perfect out of the gate. The beauty of the Lean Six Sigma program, and if you really, really absorb this in, you're going to find areas you're deficient in. If you have a huge ego and you say you're good at everything, guess what? You're not good at anything. The point of this is to look at yourself and do a little bit of benchmarking. Where can I improve? What are some things I can do better? When you present this project, I'm going to give you recommendations on where I would go with it, right? Like how would I would communicate that? Having that competitive advantage is what Lean Six Sigma is about.
Hey Zach, sorry to interrupt. I had raised my hand on here,
Well,
but it's interesting to hear you speak about that benchmarking because I guess I've unintentionally like taken on this process even when it comes to looking for employment in the past. I'll look at job descriptions and just see, I guess it's the process is called like taking a skills gap analysis, just kind of seeing what skills or qualifications like the job itself is highlighting in that job description and just taking a look at my personal resume, thinking about my background and experience and just seeing like how that measures up. Like what's the benchmark? What's the baseline? Do I need to improve? Do I need to maybe get more qualifications, get some more credentials, maybe upskill, get more education, etc. And just seeing like how I would compare. And is it worth applying to this job? Or maybe should I take a pause and try in the future, after I take some of those steps to maybe increase that skill set. But that's interesting just to see it framed in that way. And we probably all apply that same process in our lives in just different capacities, but we just didn't even know.
yeah. One of the beauty things that I like working with, and one of the reasons that I like teaching this program to the military is you guys are already familiar with standardization. You guys are already familiar with leadership at that frontline level and communication. I go into organizations. Or back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sometimes my brain will talk faster than my mouth will. But I'll go into organizations, and you know what the two biggest issues I see are? Communication and training. I'll have, I'll work with companies and I'll do training with them. And, training and communication, they really go hand in hand, right? If you think about onboarding employees, that's usually the biggest reason that there is downfalls in the organizations because that onboarding procedure doesn't set the expectation for organizational culture. How do we have meaningful conversations, impactful conversations, soft skills? Like almost like 60% of frontline workers get fired for soft skills issues, right? And on onboarding, you can really set the stage for that. A fun little story I had a couple years back, and keep in mind, I sign NDAs with these companies, and as much as I want to talk about the companies, I'll work around it and I'll talk about what the companies does, and you can piece together what companies I've worked for on some of these projects. But I remember a guy coming and I was talking to a plant manager in an organization, and I'll just say they make diapers. And he said, Zach, I want to train these people, but my issue is what if I train these people and they leave? And like without missing a beat, I said, what if you don't train these people and they stay? You still have the same defect percentage. You still have the same turnover rate. Good training is not free. It's not. As a Lean Six Sigma facilitator in the industry, I'm a little bit higher than what I started with, but my first year being a practitioner and a teacher in Lean Six Sigma, I was making like $200 an hour. Now, when I go out into industries now, I mean, typically it's like 1,200 an hour to teach Lean Six Sigma. So, like, you guys, I just told you I'm a volunteer for this. So you guys are getting the added benefit of this corporate level training at literally a fraction of the cost. That's how powerful these trainings are. Lean Six Sigma is the most powerful program that I've seen that has really developed organizations because it gives you a roadmap for change. A lot of people, they'll try to, hire people within and, in these leadership roles. And I tell companies, if you want to hire somebody within, that's great. But guess what? That person was aware of these issues that have been going on for years in the organization. What are they going to do now that they're in the position? You need to hire somebody outside the organization. I just had this talk with Warner Brothers. I was literally on the panel with these 5 people, and I said, if you want to have change in your organization, that comes from outside. Having a fresh set of eyes on your process and say, okay, this isn't accurate, this isn't accurate, this isn't accurate. And in this example, I said, if you want to hire somebody that has film studio experience, that's awesome. But how about having somebody that has an outside perspective at these different industries throughout? As a black belt, you're going to go into organizations and do continuous improvement. And, as a master black belt, I've gone into organizations where I didn't know a damn thing about the process. Like I worked with Pfizer in 2020 when like they were ramping up like the COVID stuff. You think I have a pharmaceutical background? Absolutely not. But guess what? I went in there, I helped develop an organization, a culture for change, and I used the DMAIC roadmap to improve projects. Over there, we saved that company over $127,000 per project. There was 5 projects all together, and all of a sudden, in an 8-week period, we saved that company almost $500,000 over that, really. And then, you're not even talking about you have a tangible cost and then an intangible cost where you're able to reduce their turnover. I mean, that's hard to manage when you're outside the organization. But for that organization, that was key. That's how powerful. That's why I say when I'm contracted with organizations, they have no problem paying me $1,200 an hour. If I'm leading to $500,000 in savings, absolutely. We talk about KPIs a lot, key performance indicators. For my mindset, it's about keeping people informed, keeping people involved, keeping people interested, and keeping people inspired. Like I said, you can't call yourself a leader if you're not bringing people up around you. Do I need to dial it back? Do I need to dial it back for you guys? Or like, are you guys, everybody like, are we like, is this good? Is this good lecture stuff for you guys? Or I need to dial it back and like Barney style it? Like, I don't want to like do that. I want to tell you the real answers.
I like it.
You think about, and like, my heart is with the veterans, right? Like, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the military. So many of y'all are getting out that I see come to this program and they're like, well, I can get this program for free with the military. That's cool. But what exposure did you get to the outside civilian world? What does that facilitator know about the civilian world? And so that's where I say it's beneficial to kind of come out and see, one of the things with being a facilitator here is not just reading lecture materials, it's having the experience to go off on little projects where you talk about how this applied to that realm. This is where it starts. People and processes create your business model. If you're not leading those people and you're just so focused on the Lean Six Sigma processes, you're going to fail those people and they're going to go somewhere else. What's the phrase? People don't leave their jobs, they leave bad what?
I don't know, bad situations.
Bad leadership, bad managers.
Leadership, management, companies, all the above.
And here's a big one too. You can't manage what you don't measure. I said that once and they put it on the factory wall, and I was like, oh shit, I'm quoted on the factory wall. But it's true. You can't manage what you don't measure. People make your processes happen. So, in a nutshell, why do we need Lean Six Sigma? Listen, it enhances efficiency, it reduces waste, it improves quality, customer satisfaction, and it develops a culture for continuous improvement. And like, maybe I'm a nerd, but like, this is the funnest thing. Like, think about like, I get to go into companies and like change their processes and make it better. Can I tell you guys a cool story? I mean, I'm going to anyway. I went down and I worked with a company. I'm just gonna say Blue Oval. Does everybody know what company that is? We went down and we looked at their onboarding techniques for their EV plant. I'm gonna say it again, Blue Oval. We hired 67 veterans during my time there. I don't know what you're talking about, Sean. 67 veterans, all with a salary over 70K. I don't know. I don't know. Just I don't know. Dude, I was homeless when I first got out of the military, and now I'm here helping people that I get to be the person that I needed when I transitioned, and I think that's the most powerful thing in the world. I'm gonna start crying. You guys are gonna be like, this dude okay? The idea here is continuous improvement, change for the better. Uh, we'll talk more as we go through the week, but we'll talk about Kaizen events. Kaizen, incremental change for the better, removing 10% of the inventory, removing 10% of the workers. Now, I'm not saying like fire their asses, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you remove them and repurpose them in other areas. We'll do a case study where we talk about pizza delivery. And I look at it more as like an executive pizza delivery place instead of like a mom and pop shop, but the concepts still apply. I'm also going to tell you guys about, well, I'll go into that later. I don't want to overwhelm you guys. But the idea is change for the better. You have a manager and you have a leader. And I want to talk about the differences as we go through, but that manager manages the process. That leader is what I hope for you guys to be if you're not already. That leader is going to look at that process and be like, that dog don't hunt. Like, we need to do better. This is where Lean Six Sigma really becomes powerful because it gives you a framework. You can use historical data to improve. And I'm also going to tell you guys stories about how I piss people off with the data. And not intentionally, but I think if you're making $125,000 a year as a quote unquote leader, you shouldn't have 3 months before students know if they got accepted into a program because you didn't look at it and say, okay, why do we just have one person for the college doing transcripts for 25,000 people? Ma'am, why are you getting paid $125,000? That was one of my very first educational consulting projects. I was then not allowed to talk to that lady for the remainder of the time, and she was fired shortly after when I presented the data. It took 3 months for students to understand if they got accepted into a program. Sometimes they couldn't even get financial aid because they didn't know they got accepted. So they would get kicked back until the next semester. So their shitty analysis, hold on, I'm getting too raw tonight. Their poor leadership directly affected these people and their livelihood. And I took that very personally, especially being a veteran that was homeless. So you'll understand, and I'll go through it and I'll talk about other similar cases where data's data. If you're not doing your job, it's going to show in that data. I'm sorry that hurt your feelings, but my job is not to make you feel warm and cozy. My job is to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Can I get an amen? Testify. What's the difference between Lean and Six Sigma? I talked about how Lean and Six Sigma are two different ideologies, where Lean focuses on speed in the organization and Six Sigma focuses on the statistical analysis of a place. Is that a church? Okay. How you do that? So Lean is about leaning out your operation, trimming out the waste, and Six Sigma is how much variation. You know, if I took at Six Sigma, how much variation in your process, let's think about us being throwing darts on a dartboard. I was just at a party Saturday and I was throwing darts at this dartboard and I was thinking about this slide. You know, the same thing as the rifle range for those of us that are in the military is, you know, we're trying to keep our process consistent. We're not trying to have that variation. Every process is going to have a variation, but how do you control that variation? Sometimes variation's okay as long as it's in a certain threshold. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to talk about that. Sometimes you don't need Six Sigma, you just need quality. The goal here is consistency. You know, you think about it. Before I got one interview with Warner Brothers, I applied for 52 jobs with them before that one interview. A lot of people will say, you know, that guy got lucky and got that job out of luck. I don't believe in luck. Luck's for fools. It Life changes when you show up every day. When you put one foot in front of the other and you pull your pants up and say, you know what? This shit happened in my past, but how am I going to move forward? The same thing I tell my manufacturers, I tell the people I coach and guide and lead. Mistakes are going to happen. Dude, I'm not perfect. Hell, I've been married 3 times. Hey, I show up every day though. But the idea here is consistency. You're not going to get that job. You're not going to manufacture that product unless you show up every day and you continually to work on your process, whether that's yourself or the organization. Now, explaining Six Sigma is really kind of fun, but it's a set of statistical analysis that we can use. Let me see if I can find the video real fast. Hold on. Give you like two seconds. I really want to show you this video, but I have to find it. It just popped into my head and I wanted to show it to you guys. I did something for the state of North Carolina and I won an award from the state and they did a video on me. I'm trying to remember it. Okay, I got it. Where are we at? Where are we at? Where you at? Where are you at? You guys can see that, right? It says pit. Do you think we can beat the 18%?
No. Absolutely.
Go. My job here is an industrial instructor coordinator. My actual job is going out to industries here in Pitt County and identify their training needs. Lean Six Sigma is waste reduction. We did an airplane simulation factory, right? It's a little goofy, a little bit of a setup because it works with Legos. Each worker has a job that they have to do. So for step one, this is what you're gonna do. Yes, ma'am. And then you're moving it to this piece. We're using the tools of Six Sigma and breaking it down to the basic ideas so people can grasp the understanding. 23 minutes and 50 seconds. 29 defects. We have to standardize the process. They increased their efficiency rate 65% between round 1 and round 2. They changed their process around. Dude, okay. So that guy's name is Moses. He now leads a manufacturing plant, and he was an Army vet too. And like this was like the coolest. Like I helped him get this job. Anyway, I forgot about him. I haven't seen him in a long time. They moved their workstations closer. They also took a material handler and added her to the line. And so that's the idea, is we're giving them the tools to go into industry and make the change. So we finish one part every 12 seconds. Out of 40 planes, we got how many right? 40. 40 out of 40.
100%.
I use the word empowerment, but that's really what happens. It empowers the workers to participate in continuous improvement in the organization to save them money and time. You guys were all empowered here to make the change and make the difference, right? Think about that mindset when you go to production. If you're able to have that empowerment, you start to make changes from the ground up, right? That's cool. So, essentially, that's kind of a funny video because the state of North Carolina it came down to my class, and I didn't know they were gonna be interviewing me at 8 in the morning. I didn't even have a chance to get a haircut or like, let alone like the CPAP marks on my face. Like they were just like, "Hey, we're gonna record, and then this is gonna be the way you're advertised to the state." I actually had an opportunity to go teach in Germany based off of that video because they had reached out to me asking about a supply list for that little airplane manufacturer. So, essentially Six Sigma is a set of statistical analysis tools we can use to enhance quality and perform better optimization throughout. Before we go to Sally, I try to take a break every 10 minutes. So let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back. During the 10 minutes, I want you guys to take your LinkedIn and share it in the chat. I want to you guys to kind of add each other and do all kinds of cool stuff to form a little network. Go ahead and feel free to share your stuff in the chat. I'll be back in like 10 minutes, okay? And then we'll talk about Sally and her red nose and her flower shop. So now let's talk about Sally, right? And my glimpse here is to give you and kind of a overview how the DMAIC system can apply in certain situations, right? Sally runs a flower shop, and essentially, we have to think about Sally's cost, right? She's got vases, she's got flowers, the cost of doing business with vendors, some labor, some overhead costs, and she's got taxes. Essentially, when we talk about Sally's operation, she's starting to have issues with her vases, right? This is a pivotal thing in her organization where if she has issues with the vases leaking, that's going to lead to customer dissatisfaction. That's going to then lead to returning the flower vases. And she's basically having to redo it and she loses product. And, what she invested in this amplifies because she's not fixing the defects in the process. So she's hired us as a Lean Six Sigma consultant teams to come in and analyze and try to help her out. So we identify, hey, Sally, you got some broken vases, right? She knows that. But how do we help her improve it? Well, that's where Lean Six Sigma kind of comes into place. That we look at where the defects are in the process and how we can improve that and reduce the defects or likelihood that defects occur. You think about Sally's cost. Her biggest costs are usually typically her labor, her flowers and vases, and her overhead. Right? These are kind of her big ticket items. If she's having to replace the vases, that cuts into her profit margin. So we use Lean Six Sigma as a way to use a roadmap to success in continuous improvement activities. So what is the DMAIC framework? Well, the DMAIC at its core is the component of Lean Six Sigma. It's a method for improving processes by eliminating defects and inefficiencies. The DMAIC stands for define, measure, analyze, and improve and control. And it gives us a roadmap for continuous improvement projects. Now, each phase is interconnected. So, one builds off the previous one. Tonight we're in the define phase, but you can't really define your problem unless you're measuring the impact at the same time of that problem. So that's where, we'll blend the define phase and measurement phase together often. And I'll talk about that a little bit past Sally's flower shop. But essentially, the define phase is where we identify the problem and project objectives. We're going to come together and figure out what do we need to improve it. And this is where characteristics such as objective identification, stakeholder analysis, the project charter is created, and the voice of the customer really comes together because we can't define the problem without understanding what the customer wants. And that's where the voice of the customer really kind of comes into play. So we look at the objective as how do we improve this process. In the define phase, we start analyzing and understanding what the problem is. And we move to the next state, the measure, then we move to analyze, then we improve to improve, and then we improve to control. Objective identification, this involves clearly defining the project or the problem or the goal of the project. Stakeholder analysis is where we evolve all the figureheads to meet the needs and understanding of their expectations of the project. The project charter creation is where we're developing a project charter that outlines the scope, the goals, and the timeline and the team roles. And the voice of the customer is gathering and analyzing the customer requirements and expectations. So, the biggest thing here, the takeaway is the project charter, stakeholder analysis, identifying what the issue is, and understanding the voice of the customer. So Sally is understanding that she has a high volume of vases that are broken. Those broken vases equal customer loss, rework, cuts into her profit margin. If she has to rework the process, she has to pay for the labor of reworking that process, as well as substituting her vases that cuts into her profits. We talk about the voice of the customer, and essentially the voice of the customer is a term used in business and quality management to describe the process of capturing the customer's requirements, its expectations and understandings, and product improvement feedback. During the measurement phase is created during the define phase to gather data and track metrics. Some may argue this, that like measurements is meant for the measurement phase. It doesn't matter at the end of the day because you're going to be going into it, but how can you clearly define the problem if you don't understand the cost of the problem? That's where the measurement phase is blended into the define phase. This is where data collection, process mapping, baseline performance, and statistical analysis. Some will argue in the body of knowledge that process mapping happens during the analyze phase. That's fair. I won't argue it. But if you don't understand how to map out your process, how can you really define what the issue is? So process mapping helps us identify and go into like value stream mapping. And that's where we identify what the current state of the operation is. We'll get to that a little bit more, but process mapping you can think of as just a flow chart of everything that needs to happen for that process to go from raw material to a finalized product that goes to the customer. So in data collection, we're gathering data to understand the current performance of the process. We'll usually use historical data that we have in the past to analyze and forecast what the future state should look like. The process mapping is we're creating a detailed process map of process to identify potential areas for improvement. This is where things like cycle time, takt time, OEE, operational equipment efficiency, uptime, roll throughput yield, right? That's where we judge what the percentage of likelihood of an error happening from it going through the process. Baseline performance, this is where I talk about the baseline also being the current state, right? The current state of the operation is establishing metrics and benchmarks to measure current process capability. And then we're using statistical tools to analyze data and identify variations within the process. We talk about Sally and her broken vases. Well, we have to measure the problem to really kind of get a glimpse of where we go from it. You know, Sally measures out of a pack of 10 vases that she gets to the supplier, at least 3 of those vases are broken. So we talk about something as a yield percentage and a defect percentage. Essentially, the defect percentage is the number of errors. Here, let me do this different. Errors. Well, I think I have a slide that actually does it. If you take the number of errors over the total output or the total product, you get 3 out of 10. If you take the yield, which is the yield is essentially saying you're making a good product, or after that product is made, 7 out of 10 products are good. Now you notice that the yield and defect, you know, if you add 7 to 3, that equals 10 out of 10. If you add 3 to 7, that equals 10 out of 10. So it's basically a ratio of what good and bad product is. So if we take that defect percentage and we say 3 out of 10 times 100, well, that's 30%. If we take 7 out of 10, that is 100%, or 7 out of 10 times 100, that's 70%. So essentially, we've got our defect percentage, and then we have our yield percentage. And she's saying that 30% of the time it's waste, and 70% of the time it's good. Essentially, 30% of that is just flushing it down the toilet, and it goes away. You know, think about your operation. What's the likelihood of defects that are going on? What's the likelihood of reworks? We focus on it because 30%, that's 30% of our money just going away. Sally's at a 70% yield percentage. Do you think that's the best quality for the customer? Absolutely not. Our goal is better quality management practice throughout the organization. It's 70% the best quality. No, I'm going to go down to the flower shop down the road where I know I'm going to get a good product every time I go to that store. Now, we measure the impact of that problem, right? We could get really analytical here and we could say what the cost of the vases are, what's the cost of labor, how much are we paying them per hour, what's the overhead cost, and analyzing it and saying, okay, well, this is the issue. This is the outcome that's impacting our operation. So we've measured the problem and we've measured the defect percentage, we've measured the yield percentage. And now we dive into the analyze phase is where we look at what the root cause of these issues are. Now, this is a really unique case, but oftentimes the analyze phase is the workhorse of Lean Six Sigma. The analyze phase is where we identify what the root cause of the issue is. What's the root cause of the organization? How is that organization thriving, essentially? And what is we're trying to rip the Band-Aid off here, and we're trying to see what is the real issue? What's causing these vases to be broken? In this, we do a root cause analysis. We use data analysis tools. We do a gap analysis, and we identify areas of other improvement because, you'll be kind of focused on this process. And there will be other tangible outcomes and intangible outcomes that can also be improved by just fixing one thing. The root cause analysis is where we employ techniques like the 5 whys or the fishbone diagram to identify the root cause of the problem. We utilize tools such as regression analysis, where we're looking at what is X and what is Y and where they correlate and how the regression happens and what's the likelihood or variation in the process. Or regression analysis is going to tell us that. Hypothesis testing says, hey, if a customer comes in and they say, hey, these vases are broken, and we test if that's true. And we use Pareto charts as a way to, another name for Pareto is the 80-20 principle, essentially saying that 80% of your problem is coming from only 20% of your process. And then we do a gap analysis. And this is where I really specialize in, is comparing what our current state is performing at and then our desired level of performance. And as a master black belt facilitator, and as a black belt, you'll dive into this too, but as a master black belt, we really judge those metrics and we get the whole company and organization at that standard. And then we identify improvement areas, pinpointing specific areas where changes will have the most impact. So Sally's determined the root cause of her issues, and it's a vendor-supplier issue. Well, what often happens sometimes when I'm doing continuous improvement projects, and I'll go down to these companies, and we'll start talking about the issues, what do you think happens? Well, that's where finger pointing starts happening. Well, we're jacked up in this department because of this department. Well, the customer doesn't see it as that. They're not going to understand that this is really in your manufacturing department and the quality assurance department. The customer views it as one organization. So I tell companies, get your mind out of that silo mentality of, well, this is just my job. Okay, that's cool. But if these problems add up, guess what happens to your job? Your job goes away and you become unemployed. I don't like leading with a fear tactic, but just for this educational purposes, it's true. If you don't focus on quality and your customer leaves and you lose a lot of customers, guess what? You're not going to be in business. This is the case with Denso right down the road, or Asmo, whatever name they went under now. But essentially they closed down because they had so many quality defects. They Customers shifted away from them. It hurts, but the data proves it. So you have to get out of that silo mentality. And the one thing I like about this case study is Sally called her vendor and she collaborated. Instead of saying, you guys are jacked up and you're this, that hostile approach is not going to get collaboration. Sometimes the answer, hold on. Sometimes the answer isn't to assign blame, but work together. At the end of the day, the mission still has to happen. How you lead that mission really will have impacting the outcome of it. So she's collaborating with the vendors. She's on the phone with them. She's got a great relationship with the vendors. And something that was never documented, but what was mentioned to the vendor is about 25 feet from Sally's flower shop loading bay, there's a bump that was incredibly too high. Essentially, that bump caused the vases to be broken. And no matter how slow the trucks went over it, usually they had some type of issue just because of the backlash of it. So yeah, Sally could have been like, well, you guys got to, get your shit together. You guys got to fix this for me. But Sally took it proactively and she said, okay, if there's a bump there about 25 feet, guess what? I'm going to do an improvement and I'm going to get rid of that bump. The improvement phase is where you take all that data that you gathered during the analyze phase and you implement solutions to eliminate that root cause. You develop solutions development, design of experiments, implementation plans, and pilot the studies. Solution development is where we're brainstorming and selecting solutions to address the root cause. The design of experiments is where we're testing potential solutions to see their effect on the process. Implementation plan is we're developing a detailed plan for implementation and choosing solutions. And piloting the studies is where we're running small-scale tests to validate the effectiveness of the solution. In the improvement phase, a quick tip. All of the DMAIC phrase, you're not just doing by yourself. The improvement phase essentially is where you put and bring people in. Remember I said as a leader, you can't call yourself a leader unless you're bringing people up. Well, if you start to try to improve the process and you don't work with people, that means you don't get buy-in. If people aren't a part of the process, you have to show them why it's important to be and why to change. Resistance, and I teach change management theory, all resistance means is they don't fully understand the process. Piloting a study or piloting a process, we'll call it a Kaizen event, is where we're running a small scale test to validate the effectiveness of that solution. The improvement phase is where change management ideologies really come into play. So Sally took it upon her. She said, look, you guys are telling me there's a bump out there. I'm going to get rid of that son of a gun. So we got a little bit of construction. During these events, this is where you usually see several issues in the organization. This is where communication comes key. This is where transparency and visual leadership come to play. My second dissertation is on creative leadership and emotional intelligence in change management, and that's what my dissertation revolves around. And I'm actually actively researching companies and getting executive leaders to be a part of my case study. One of the ones that I'm reaching out to and I'm part of right now is James Gunn from DC Studios, Jim Lee from DC Comics. I have a love for comics, if you can't tell. It's just who I am. But their leadership and the way DC Studios has changed throughout the last couple of years, and the atmosphere and the environment and the way that they're moving along and creating better quality movies is something that's a test to it. Same thing here with the Sally's Flower Shop. As a CEO, she could have just let the issues continue, but She's like, hell no, we got to fix this. Let's pause. Let's reflect. How many of you guys have been a part of a continuous improvement activity in your career? I want to hear from you. Let's open the floor. They got a couple minutes to finish up this construction job, so I want to hear from you guys. How many of you guys have been a part of an improvement project? At this stage in the improvement, what were some issues you had in implementing that improvement?
Hey Zach, what's going on, brother?
Hey, dude.
Hey, we at my job we implemented a new phase of like our intake forms and how we were tracking and what type of data we wanted to collect.
Yeah.
Originally, oh, originally when people came in, we just got their last name, first name, and like their departments. But I had a junior sailor that was very advanced in like Excel, and he was able to build like this spreadsheet from like the bottom up of tracking people's departments, they when they're getting out, their religious preference, and it really helped us out.
Yeah. And another example is empowering your workers to make a difference, essentially. That was a big help, wasn't it? To track it.
Yeah, it was, and we're still building on it, but we have the framework where now we have a system in place.
What about Sean? Sean, what was your project you worked on?
Exact. So I was stationed over in Silverdale at the Strategic Systems Programs where we did security for nuclear weapon security. And essentially, it's mandated there through DoD for continuous improvements to minimize any type of procedural compliance errors or things that would lead to risk or catastrophic failures, et cetera, et cetera. So literally anytime someone went outside of procedure, we would have to do basically what you're describing here in the DMEAC process of, okay, what's problem number one? And then, break it down from the data point and then organizing all the stakeholders from security to the folks that are technical experts, et cetera, depending on what the problem was, and kind of flesh out what we thought the root cause was, and then formulate corrective actions. A lot of the friction came really as it really hit home earlier when you were talking about like pointing the finger. There's a lot of room. There's a lot of tendency for the conversation to go that way, and you kind of got to keep the room in line with what we're trying to achieve there. And then I remember a lot of frustrations because the easy go-to, which also a point that you mentioned earlier that hits home is the easy fix is usually, well, the error came from communication or we need more training. It's kind of my experience there with that.
Yeah, good. What else? Who else has been a part of a project?
Well, I'll go ahead and speak. In regards to just continuous improvement, process improvement, from my experience working as an IT trainer and just facilitating end user courses, I would travel to different hospitals and have to teach the nurses and doctors how to use the new EHR system that was going live on their site. So, I mean, after each and every end user course, I would have to kind of tweak the curriculum, of course, not changing fundamentally what I'm teaching and showing them, but, either adding more detail or making the workflow, I mean, like making the training material fit their workflow even better. Just taking feedback and other kind of details that I would gather just either from my personal experience, the end user's experience, whatever I can do to kind of make the experience better each and every time I would run through each course for those end users. So I would have to implement that process throughout my whole time in that role as a trainer.
Absolutely. You know, this is where you start to see the involvement of people. I've always said when you involve people, you make them a part of something greater than themselves. We just because we improve a process doesn't mean it's going to stick right away. But the more you involve people, the more it gets implemented and developed into the culture of the organization. So she improved her process. Customers were happy. They were able to establish trust with him, and the sales improved, and the quality of the vases improved as well. I talked about ISO 9001, which is quality management systems. Every company, if it's in the manufacturing realm or business realm, or they produce something, they got to have a quality standard that they have to adhere to. In this situation, I don't know if she would have ISO, she probably wouldn't have all that stuff, but her vendors would. They would have ISO 9001 quality management systems in place and a standard set in place. But if she didn't improve those processes, she would lose that ISO certification. If her vendors were sending her shitty product, hold on. If her vendors were sending her a bad product, they would lose their standards. And then, most companies wouldn't work with that organization because they don't have a quality to say they're adhering to standards of quality management practices. So she's done several different things here. She's improved vendor relationships. She's developed a better relationship with her customer because she says, "Hey, I hear you. I understand what your voice is. You're telling me these things are jacked up." And she's looked at the longevity of her organization because at the end of the day, if Sally don't have customers, Sally's flower shop's closing down. Her sales improved. And she can look at other areas of improvement based off the recommendations from this one project, right? Oftentimes, continuous improvement projects are like going down a rabbit hole on YouTube. You'll start with one video, and by the end of the night, you're on a completely different subject. The hardest part about leading teams through activities of continuous improvement is keeping their focus. Right? This is the focus we're going on right now. We can talk about these different areas and we can address them at a different time. But my main priority is what's costing my organization the most amount of money, and that was broken bases. Well, how is she going to sustain it? Let me ask you guys, how many times have you guys had leadership come in and they come up with these cool little activities that feel good and they're, supposed to be improving quality, but all of a sudden that person deploys, or that person gets reassigned to another job, or that leader goes and quits and goes to another organization. What's some of the things you see with that? Well, you see uh, the processes weren't documented. There was no standardization. There was no corrective actions that were put in place. There were no SOPs driven. And so it reverts back to the way things were. My daddy said, don't start something unless you finish it. I mean, he's been married 7 times, so he's probably not the best example here of continuous improvement. But essentially, you want to get to a baseline and establish a new baseline and continue to grow. You don't want to start at a baseline and improve it, and all of a sudden, when that leader leaves, it goes back to the way things were. Control phase, maintaining the improvements and ensuring consistent performance. At the control phase is where we're puppeting the strings and controlling that process. This could be done several different ways, and we'll talk about poka-yoke. We'll talk about standardization or standardized work a little bit later on in the control phase night. But we talk about process monitoring, standardization, response planning, continuous improvement. Process monitoring and establishing new process metrics, monitoring them to ensure sustained improvement. Standardization is documenting new processes and ensuring they're consistently applied. The response plan is where you're creating a plan to address any future process variations or lapse. And continuous improvement is where you're regularly reviewing process performance and seeking opportunities for further enhancement. Oftentimes in the control phase, this is where documentation becomes key. Those SOP documentations, the ability to look at processes and control the variation that might occur from it. How many of you guys have had issues controlling a process before? What led to the control issues? I guess that's the better question.
Well, in my case, I would say issues like new software, new program. Like in the Army, we transitioned to IPSE, and there were updates and changes every week. So we didn't have control. We learned to do a action one way, but next week it's change. And they were still working on the SOP and the manual, so it was constant change that we didn't really have a way yet, which caused a lot of problems when it came throughout the command because things were not getting done.
Sean kind of hit the nail on the head when you say misalignment. A lot of times our projects are revolved around what the vision of the stakeholders are and aligning what their expectations are with what's really happening in the organization. Continuous improvement projects can fail for various reasons. How many of you guys have had issues with a project because somebody's ego got in the way? How many of you guys have had issues because somebody took on too much responsibility and they're trying to do everything and they're not a good team player? That was my issue when I first started. When I was in the military and very young in my career, I would try to take on so much because I didn't really have good control. I didn't have good managerial skills. When I was in the military, I used to think like yelling at somebody, telling them what to do was leadership, and contrary to popular belief, it's not. People respond better to people they like and people that influence them when they're not even in the room. As I started to get better at managing people and get more experience, and the only way I got experience is by failing. But as I got better, I remember, senior leadership in the military, they were like, well, leadership isn't about likership. And I was like, first off, you probably need a dictionary because that's not a word, but it really is about liking somebody, about looking at somebody and saying, okay, I don't want to let you down. Good leaders involve the team. They have a sense of connection. That's absolutely right. Leadership does not happen behind the desk. And I'll say it again. Leadership don't happen behind the desk. It happens when you're involved with your workers. Telling people and driving people and saying you're going to do this because I said so. That's a weak leadership mentality. That's not even a leadership. That's just telling somebody what to do. Leadership is having that influence when you're not in the room that they're going to do the right thing. Another problem that happens during this phase is you'll start to see people cut corners. Did you really inspect that process? Did you really do a quality check on that assembly line every hour? Well, here's the value of why we do this quality check. If you don't do it, there's going to be bad products that go out to customers. We get enough of those bad products, we're going to lose those customers. Damages reputation. I remember being young in my career, and I would tell somebody to do something and they would ask a question and I would be like, just do it. Now I look back and I say, okay, well, that wasn't a good definition of done, right? I had expectations of what it should look like, but I didn't effectively communicate what the final product should look like. So at the end of the day, or the end of the project, it didn't meet my expectations. Or not just my expectations, but what the project should look like. We talk about the definition of done in this is during the control phase, are we meeting the metrics? Look, you're not going to get everything right all in one shot. But the control phases, we start looking at what the data points are. What's the quality defects in the scatter plot and how much variations between them and how we can control it. Documentation is key in sustaining the improvements. Every job description should have some type of SOP. I don't think it's rocket scientist. I don't think it's rocket science at all. Are you having a good SOP, a standard operating procedure? Not just that, but on the back of that SOP, are you doing corrective action procedures? Are you documenting it? Here's the thing too. We live in a digital age. Is our turnover binder or our SOP binder accurate that the whole company sees it? Having a good electronic documentation SharePoint is crucial. Because what is the point of having an SOP, having corrective action procedures if only one person sees it? That's what I talk about in change management, the power of visual leadership. Sally's Flower Shop is a unique example of how Lean Six Sigma projects and collaboration can work. Her flower shop flourished. She wound up buying several other flower shops and implementing them all over the country. This is based off of a real company. It's not a flower shop, but very similar to a mom and pop shop that I worked with. When you focus on the little issues, those little issues add up to bigger issues. If you can nip those and you can fix them along the way, maybe you're not going to fix the bigger issues, but you keep hammering at it. It's like football. What usually gets the ball downfield the most? That big Hail Mary pass? Or is it small incremental changes along the way? Small movements of that football down the field? A little bit of food for thought. Lean Six Sigma revolves around two things. And if you go to an interview, they're probably going to ask you this. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe. I don't know. Just be prepared for it. Central tendency and standard deviation. These are the core components that are most fundamental to standardization. Central tendency is how does your data cluster around the mean? This dives into the central limit theorem, theorem constraints, but we'll look at it as CLT, central limit theorem. And standard deviation is how far apart or spread out is your data. We look at the central limit theorem, we can kind of understand this bell curve. We call it a normal distribution. But it states that as data is collected, it tends to center primarily around the mean. Around 68% of our data is close to the average. We'll dive into this more when we get into the measurement night tomorrow. But basically, X bar represents our target point. Now, this is where I may not be teaching the body of knowledge for Lean Six Sigma, and I'm going to get to there. But I want you to be aware of when I say X bar, we're talking about average of our sample data, right? Our data and our process should be hitting that center line, and that's what X bar represents. 68% of the data highlighted in yellow is talking about within one standard deviation, our process should have 68% of the data. The central limit theorem is a theory. But essentially, if I took you guys and if I had 30 students in class tonight and I lined you up, measured your heights, 68% of you would be within one standard deviation of the mean. That's what the X bar represents, is the mean or average, or what we know it is a quality management average would be mu, not mu, but mu. And it's basically MU. And it represents the average of our data collection. Sigma is a statistical term that represents the standard deviation of a data set. The X bar represents our average. We just met that. We understand 68% of our data should be within one standard deviation, plus or minus the mean. It's called Six Sigma because there are 6 standard deviations in this diagram. You can technically have as many standard deviations as you want, or as many sigmas as you want, but you also have to take into account, are you overly constraining your process? As if you're making pizzas and you're a half a centimeter off, is that going to damage eating that pizza? Hell no. I don't have weight standards anymore. I love pizza. I love pizza so much that I bought a pizza business 2 weeks ago and I turned it into a mobile pizza business. I'll show you guys a little. Can I show you guys this real fast? All right. Let me find it. I bought a mobile. Oh, you guys can't see it. You can see I bought a mobile pizza truck. It's kind of symbolic because we're going to be doing a pizza case, but I invested in a guy's business and turned it mobile. We got rid of Sally's overhead cost of the building, essentially, and turn it into a food truck. And the food truck will generate by about $2,400 a day, minus the cost, but that's still doing pretty well. But the idea is standardizing a process, delivering a good product to the customer, not overly constraining our process. Like if we had 16 sigmas in there and we were trying to be super scientific with it, at the end of the day, you've heard of analysis paralysis, right? You can look at changing a process and talk about it. Oh, that's hair all wild. You can look at changing a process, but at the end of the day, if your rubber's not meeting the road, you can't get to your destination. That's why we do small incremental changes. We don't try to move that football down the field with a Hail Mary pass every time, because that's not what statistically is going to get us there. So if you have a test question or anything like that, Lean Six Sigma revolves around these two things: central tendency and standard deviation. Let's take a 10-minute break and we'll come back and move on to the next area. You guys having a good time? You guys still hanging out with me? We'll be right back.
What are you doing, Tony Pepperoni? You want to say hi to the class? Come here. Come here.
All right, everybody. You guys meet Tony. This is Tony. He's my best friend. He's from San Antonio, and I found him a couple years ago when I was doing work. And I might have kidnapped his ass. I don't really know, but he was a homeless dog. He was covered in fleas. But now he's my best friend. You want to say hi to everybody? Okay. All right. We'll be back. But I like to kind of break things down into a fun way to kind of analyze this. There's white belts and yellow belts. White belt is not always universally recognized by organizations, but a yellow belt is. A white belt is that fundamental understanding of lean principles. They'll report significant errors to process green belts and black belts. Yellow belts go into the basic vocabulary of Lean Six Sigma and have a basic process tool understanding. The droids are the workers, the stormtroopers are the ones that collect the data, right? You can't have your process without people. And I tell people that everybody should be certified in Lean Six Sigma to some extent. And I'm not just saying it from a sales standpoint or anything like that, like a revenue standpoint. It really is a phenomenal thing that people are trained in. Most organizations do onboarding for these two levels. During the onboarding process, typically they do a little yellow belt class to make sure that the employees understand at least the foundations of continuous improvement. Then we go on to Obi-Wan Kenobi. He led a smaller project team when he had Luke, Leia, Chewie, the droids, C-3PO, and R2-D2. Right? His focus wasn't on a big galactic war. His focus was on that project team. Your Lean Six Sigma green belts are typically your coaches in the organization. They're guiding the yellow belts and white belts through continuous improvement, and they have more of a project experience. A lot of you guys, you might not call it Lean Six Sigma, but you do have project experience leading small teams. Most of the people that come from the enlisted side of the house are at least an E5 or above. And most of the people that come to us from the industry are in that middle management role where their focus is on smaller projects. right? As I said, when you move that football down the field, you're not just doing Hail Mary passes, you're doing little improvements along the way. And that's what these green belts are for. You have the black belt, right? And if you look at Darth Vader, he was on a strategic front for the Galactic Empire. I know I can get super in depth. I may have or may have not applied for a job with George Lucas's studio. But the idea here is you're managing multiple projects, continuous improvement activities along the way, um, lead to change management ideologies, right? You're going to be dealing with multiple things and you're going to be juggling multiple projects. Well, what a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt does is they teach, mentor, coach, and lead Lean Six Sigma projects. Right? How do you teach and coach multiple projects? Well, that's getting a good foundation on the DMAIC system because then it becomes kind of plug and play. And as you get more experience leading teams and projects, you're not always going to have successful projects. They're going to fail, but from those failures, you can apply those to other projects. So your white, yellow, green, and black are typically what the normal worker or normal manager or leader in an organization have. Now, I talked about this earlier, knowing the difference between a leader and a manager. That manager is going to maintain the status quo and have a minimum influence on changing the process. Well, that leader is going to step in and say, okay, this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right. But I'm going to show us how we get to right. I'm going to show us how do we get to a better product for our customer or a better process for our customer. My goal for you guys is to be that leader in your organization, be that change agent that stands up and says, this isn't right, but we can fix it. If we all work together and we put forth a valid effort, we can change. That's what's the power of becoming a black belt is you're equipped with the leadership frameworks to change and guide teams. One of the benefits of this program that you're never going to have in other things is when we go into the analyze phase, I'll talk about other frameworks outside of Lean Six Sigma, such as the Kotter model, the Scrum methodology, and change management practices, right? Lean Six Sigma is not just change management. Change management has so many different levels and different programs that fall under the ideology of change management. My glimpse is to prepare you for the real world industry. That's why I tell you guys, when you're coming through these programs and you're going to this program, don't stop here. If you tell an employer I'm also certified in Scrum or I'm also a change management practitioner, man, that adds more volume to your resume, and it shows that you have the ability to guide and influence that organization. You tell an organization, hey, I'm certified in quality management systems, right? The more you invest in yourself, ladies and gentlemen, the more likelihood of landing that six-figure job. It's a no-brainer. The more you invest your time into programs and certifications that make you a better candidate, they're going to see that. As I said, my goal for you guys is to be leaders. I'm not awarding a black belt to someone that's just going to check the box. And I wouldn't hire a black belt that just checks the box. I want to find somebody that can come into my organization and see what's wrong, help manage it, but influence and guide people towards continuous improvement activities. Now, Palpatine, or Lord Sidious, as he's known. Right? I put this as the master black belt, right? Besides Yoda, there are two different sides of the hat, right? You have the good side of the Force, right? Yoda's pretty skilled in that. And then you have the Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, Palpatine. He's experienced in this methodology. He's a change agent. He's experienced in guiding teams throughout. In our Master Black Belt program on Saturday, we'll talk about being a change agent. I guide you guys to become change agents in an organization. Typically, to teach Lean Six Sigma, all you have to be is a black belt. A Master Black Belt is more of an influence in the organization. But you can't teach it unless you have experience with these projects and adding to it. You know, my military guys, I tell you guys that your last year, you should be applying for different jobs in different industries and researching those industries. And those that have a Lean Six Sigma background, you can look up what type of Lean Six Sigma projects they're doing and kind of having that as a reference to how you guide and lead teams. I became a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt in 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. And within a short amount of time, I had an influx of companies interested in hiring me to do consulting, and not just consulting, but coming in as a continuous improvement expert as a full-time job. Now, why does this matter to you? Well, you know, the white belts and yellow belts, they're typically that front line, the techs, the leads. The green belt's that middle management level. The black belt is that supervisory level in Lean Six Sigma. And then that champion master black belt is the executive in the organization. You know, just remember that no matter what, your title doesn't quantify you as a leader. Just because you have that rank doesn't make you a leader. What you do and your actions, your integrity, your example, your empathy, your drive, your behavior, your attitude towards things. I teach a program called Frontline Leadership, and attitude plays a huge factor. Just because you disagree with the company's policy doesn't mean that it's bad. It could be, but you're a representative of that organization. If you're coming in and saying, well, they're having us do this bullshit and we have to do this, and you're having a negative attitude, that trickles down to your team. If you're coming in and you're saying, well, I don't know why they want us to change this, but we're going through and doing it anyway, that immediately creates a us versus them mentality. I tell people, get rid of that silo mentality, because your customer doesn't see it as executive leadership or quality management area or the manufacturing department. They see it as one organization. You'll see times where in Japanese culture, and America's starting to adopt it in their manufacturing realm and other institutions, but they have an open bay layout. Like everybody's on the floor at the same time, desk and not everything. Nobody's in an office. Um, and they realize that productivity happens really there, because guess what? If you're a leader and you're just on your computer all the time and you're in an open bay, guess what? Everybody sees that. Overall, doing these things will help get buy-in. They'll get your team's respect, and they'll make you a better leader. You know, I look at Toys R Us, right? And I say, you know, how would Toys R Us have, uh, how would you save Toys R Us if we had historical data? Hold on just one second. Where's it slide? You know, I talk about historical data being a good reference for us. We can use examples like Toys R Us, and we can use examples as Blockbuster, Radio Shack. These companies that didn't had a good initiative at first and they had a good business model, but if you don't adapt with the changes in time, your company is going to fall short. We don't have a crystal ball. We can't identify every problem in an organization, nor will we want to. We want to identify what's the most important factors and where can we make the most improvement um, with the least amount of effort. I kind of joke with people and I tell them I'm kind of a lazy practitioner of Lean Six Sigma. They say, Zach, what do you mean? You've trained all these organizations. Yeah, I'm not trying to tackle every one of their damn problems. If they have a problem, we focus on that problem and we'll put recommendations. But I don't have a crystal ball to say where we're going to be in 3 years. I can say where our current state is and our future state and how we can get there. But changes are going to happen. If you think about, changes in technology in the last 2 years, AI has been implemented. Artificial intelligence has come a long way. All of a sudden people are using that more. And I say, some people say, well, it's a crutch. Yes, to some people that don't have the experience or exposure, absolutely. If you don't have process improvement methodologies down and you're relying on a computer, you're going to fail. But if you can use it to articulate your words, and I'm a terrible speller, so I use AI a lot because, like, hey, I was born to lead, baby, not to read. But we look at the ideologies of these companies and where they fell short. If we look at Toys R Us recovery strategy, they started to really kind of shift towards moving around 2015, 2014. It was already too late. Ooh, Circuit City, Sam Goody, Radio Shack, Nobody Beats Wiz. KB Toys is also, yeah, yeah. Bad news doesn't get better with time. It just doesn't. You have to look at strategies to improve your processes. Amazon came around in 2010. I mean, like they've been around for a while since the invention of the internet. But they came out and they created a different business model. And Toys R Us, they were heavily reliant on brick and mortar establishments. We talked about Sally's Flower Shop where she had labor costs, she had overhead costs, taxes, vases, vendors, right? Toys R Us had this brick and mortar establishment. We want our people to come there. You see that too. Those of you that are in the higher education community, you see their business model failing. I see it every day. I even done many consulting projects with community colleges and universities, and I said, you need to ramp up your online training. We have 15 people in this class. We had over 84 people register for this program. Most universities and community colleges struggle with attendance because they want people, just like Toys R Us, to come into their establishment. But if you can deliver a product to a customer in the comfort of their home and they don't have to leave the home, you create a better opportunity for the consumer. Same thing what Amazon did is within a couple of clicks, you'll get your product. Toys R Us chose not to do anything until it was too late. And by the time they started closing down stores. Another new example, I haven't done much research into Red Lobster, but Red Lobster hired a very young CEO and he pivoted that organization, closed down stores that weren't producing. Better quality in the organization is what he focused on. And he turned Red Lobster around. I don't go to Red Lobster. I live on North Carolina. I'd rather just go out to the sea and catch it. But I want you to think about what would be your strategy to recover Toys R Us. I want to do this in where you guys go in your breakout room. I'm going to put you guys in 2 breakout rooms. I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes. And I want you guys to kind of come up with an idea. It doesn't have to be concrete. And we'll talk about it after your 15 minutes. But I'm going to put you guys in there. Let me do this. Let me get your breakout rooms going. So welcome back, everybody. Throughout this last 15 minutes, you're supposed to be building a strategy towards pitching an idea to revolutionize Toys R Us. And I want to hear from each group, nothing super in depth, but more of just maybe a couple minutes of talking. But I want to start with room 1. That's Jasmine, Mr. James, Sean, Sierra, and Terry.
Hey, you guys.
Hello.
We really enjoyed this group. I'm thankful that my group had such great ideas. There were a few things that we discussed and came up with. I actually have a few notes here. Um, I don't know if anyone else from my group wants to speak up or if you just want me to kind of go over the notes we made.
Looks like you got it.
Okay, cool. So one thing that we discussed for Toys R Us, we agreed that the actual store itself was great. It's great to have the option to have like a kid-friendly space that's geared for kids specifically, especially an entire store and not maybe just one or two little aisles like how Walmart and Target are. But an interactive play model would be great where kids can actually play with things in store and just kind of keep them and both, their parents or whatever adult is with them in the store longer to one, attract them to maybe browse and stay in store, increase sales. Another point we came up with is lowering overhead costs by switching to more of an e-commerce model and increasing or maybe implementing more of a heavy digital storefront presence. So personally, Toys R Us didn't do too well because they didn't adapt with the times. So increasing their digital presence, increasing more of their tech and e-commerce would definitely help increase sales. They can even um, revolutionize their business and their company by implementing membership perks, like, for example, Amazon Prime. So just having those perks with people who decide to become actual members of their company, incorporating discounts and different sales, holiday exclusives as well. One other thing that we also brainstormed was like subscription box sets. So maybe every 30, 60, 90 days, etc., whatever time frame is chosen, just allowing their members or customers to subscribe to like a special set of toys or selections that would be mailed to them during those time frames, like I mentioned, 30, 60, 90-day windows. And I believe that would definitely help just to one, keep their fan base loyal to them, keep their fan base excited about their company and about their products, and also a way for their audience to even test out new things. And that would help also to increase just loyalty incentives to keep their customers, loyal to them specifically. So those were a few things that we discussed.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jasmine. I want to hear from the next group. It's Grace, Mary, Michael, Ola. Hello, room 2.
Who's in room 2 again? Well, I don't know if that was my group or not.
Grace, Mary, Michael, Ola. Come on, guys. Okay, we're gonna skip that group. Elias, uh, Jadine, and Jared, and Kristen. I want to hear from you guys, and we'll come back. We'll circle back to room 2 when you guys get it figured out.
That was my group, correct?
Yep, that was
Yes,
us.
sir.
Well, I don't know if anybody else want to talk, but I can take it. Some of it that we discussed mainly was trying to partner off their nostalgia piece. Toys R Us did a great job. Well, I can say in a sense when I was a kid of keeping nostalgia, but as the toy market progressed and like companies like Walmart, Amazon, etc., came along where it became more easy to do things online. Toys R Us then kind of expand in the e-commerce world. So I think that kind of, well, in a sense, we both, all of us think they kind of like gave them a stagnant piece. So one big thing we did put was like for them to outsource and grow e-commerce attached to like a secondary partnership with a company like Disney or Amazon, but mainly aiming towards like the Disney realm. More so like an example of like Disney would put out shows, movies, etc. That like kids were like, or like even adults at our age, like at one point being able to reproduce those toys at a high facet or even have sales with like companies through Amazon or using their supply chain to sell products or get a lot of these tools needed to make these products at a lower price. I think that kind of would have kept them in business or at least kept them above water for a little while longer.
Okay, I like that. Let's circle back. Let's go over to room 2.
Hello, sorry. I for whatever reason couldn't get my mic to work. So in room 2, we mostly just discussed how we think it would have been a benefit if they would have encouraged more online marketing versus
Mm,
just in store.
yeah, I think that how would they do that online marketing? What do you think?
I mean, I think that's honestly why Amazon kind of killed off Toys R Us, not just the online part, but also their pricing had a big part of it.
Mhm.
But advertising, I think, would be a good benefit.
Yeah, I think that overall, right? You guys can kind of see how we can use this data to kind of move forward in our organization. We can use the pitfalls and shortcomings of these organizations, and we can see, through this, how much of a dominant power Toys R Us became in the industry, or Amazon became in the industry. And, that's one thing that I want you guys to kind of take away from this is just because things meet the status quo, the advances in technology are going to change. We talk about benchmarking. What is one organization doing different than another organization is? How can we have the best practices in our organization? You know, this is a simple exercise, but I want you to start thinking about strategy. Those of you coming from the military, the military is not going to die out, right? But we start to see issues right now. We have a government shutdown, right? Why do we have that? Because there's inefficiencies and defectiveness in our Congress. Why do we have that? Because the budgets that go into these organizations and, the budgets that we have are kind of out past what they could be. That's why we need to have change management ideologies implemented in the DoD. You think about what did we uncover a couple of years ago or last year when Doge came in and they did an investigation and we were sending millions of dollars to organizations that like DEI awareness in some foreign country. Like, what the hell does that have to do with America? Why are we putting all this money and infrastructure into another country when we could be putting it into our infrastructure to take care of our veterans? Because we sure as hell ain't doing the best job at that. Oftentimes, as a Lean Six Sigma practitioner and consultant, and if you go in the consulting realm, you're not going to be the most liked person in the room. You just have to accept that. Change is hard no matter what because people don't want to do it. People become accustomed to certain things and become accustomed to certain practices and they don't change. I talk a lot about the community college model failing. They're starting to see more workforce initiatives than degrees, and their degree programs are shorting because more people are just going straight into the university. As a practitioner and consultant in Lean Six Sigma, and as you become a black belt and leading and guiding change, start thinking about strategy of how to keep the operation going, but how to improve it. It sometimes uh, is overwhelming when you start thinking about all the continuous improvement projects you can do. But it starts with coordinating, finding a root cause, finding the issue that has the most impact in the organization where you can actually change it with the least amount of effort. And over time, those smaller continuous improvement activities save the organization. And oftentimes, and I'll go into more throughout the week, but oftentimes these process improvement projects create more jobs. I had a company earlier on in my career, not too early, about 2016, 2017. They manufacture, we'll use Optimus for example. You see how like there's a plastic box that the toy sits in, right? Well, they would manufacture that plastic for toys or liquor bottles or you name it. They would get a request and they would send it in, and they were having a hard time keeping up with the volume because they were using a machine that was 30 years old. And I said, well, why don't we come in and why don't you invest in a new machine? It was $300,000. And I do a program outside of this called Cost Analysis and Functions of Excel, where I'll go through and I'll talk about depreciation value and business. And, the overall, the thing that I want you to kind of take away with it is it's like an old car. At some point, you have to say, do I continue to invest in this piece of shit or do I change it and put in a new process, put in a new vehicle that I'm not putting as much money into? I got to make a payment, but it's reliable and it gets the job done. The machine that they got was like 300,000. I can't remember now. It was a newer version of the current machine they had. And all of a sudden they have to get, for that machine to work properly, they had to learn G code. They had to understand the technology piece. They had to get some integrated machinery and PLC. So PLC's programmable logic controller. Like if you think about a stoplight, essentially it's what programs that stoplight to go from green to red, right? Yeah, green, red, and yellow. Applying that back to the machine, they had workers that they weren't qualified to run this machine. Well, we trained up their workforce. And because they invested so much in this machine, within 6 months, they paid off that $300,000 loan to buy that machine. Added benefit is they added a second shift because they were producing and having more volume and getting more bids. And they also added 17 jobs to that plant. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you go in a rural area and you add 17 jobs with a median salary over $50,000, all of a sudden that impacts the economy in the area and the town, right? Um, so they were able to open up a second shift. They were able to invest in a new machine, get their workforce trained in that machine. And as of today, they've added almost 45 jobs because of that one machine, and they added a second machine, so they invested another 300,000 into it. They are one of the leading plastic manufacturers in the country now. That's the power of continuous improvement and the power you guys have. And as I said, you have black and white thinking, but if that dog's not hunting anymore, you got to get a new dog. And that's the way you have to look at processes. Are you going to continue to invest in the old way of thinking? Or are you going to invest in the new process that's going to have the most dividends for your organization? Here's kind of just a general kind of thing I kind of grabbed online of the power of, when you get certified in black belt, and this opens a new door, whether it's the champion, the black belt, lean manufacturing facilitator, Six Sigma black belt, quality engineer, continuous improvement. Every one of these roles is above $60,000. Depending on where you live, that's a decent wage of living. As a consultant, and this is where I've built my career, and you can see the impact that you have on an organization for change. As I talked about, I specialize in change management methodologies now, and it's not just Lean Six Sigma I focus on other, change ideologies, the Kotter model, Scrum, um, change management practitioner, the Prosky certification, right? It has so much power in an organization. Even grabbing this data right here is a black belt, $84,000. Master black belt, 121,000. As a master black belt, as I told you in my first year, and within the first 6 months, I was making well over $200,000 just doing consulting as a master black belt. It's a lot of money, and companies will pay me to do these trainings, but the impact that a good practitioner and facilitator can have on that organization goes far beyond. CMI Plastics went from like 3 million a year, and now they're doing about 12 million a year in revenue sales. Oh shit, I'm not supposed to say their name. You didn't hear CMI Plastics at all. But that's the power of just that one little improvement. I mean, it was a major overhaul, right? Like it was a major overhaul, replacing a machinery to produce more products and a better quality product for their customer. But that's the power you have as a consultant, as a Six Sigma professional. Whether you go in the consulting range or you go into the industry as just a quality management specialist. It has so much value for you guys. So one of the things that I think is pivotal, we've talked about some of these industries and the power of Lean Six Sigma. Let's dive into the history of it, right? History of lean manufacturing from Henry Ford all the way to the Toyota production system and beyond. There are some pivotal figures in Lean Six Sigma community that this is kind of the overarching, and we'll dive more into some of the ones that I think are really pivotal. But Henry Ford really started the Lean Six Sigma methodology. Of course, it wasn't called that back then, but Henry Ford's known for the Model T, right? And not just creating this vehicle, but the mass production line that he established. Back in the day, Ford was making about 100 cars a month. And he was a pivotal figure in the community because he moved over. Him and Edward Deming also went into Japan after World War II, and we devastated their economy. And they weren't afraid to go about and teach a foreign country their processes. Well, where Ford was making 100 vehicles a month, the Toyota production system came around, and Toyota was making 1,000 vehicles a month. They implemented that ideology and improved upon it and created a standard for how to lead operational excellence in an organization. We'll come back to Henry Ford in a little bit. The next figure is Walter Sheward, who's credited as the father of statistical control. He was an engineer and statistician who worked at Bell Laboratories. Well, what do we have that's called Bell in statistics? The bell-shaped curve. So he helped create the theory of the normal distribution. Edward Deming, probably one of the most impactful people in my career, because I learned under another person who directly worked under him. Edward Deming died in the early 90s, but his philosophy on process engineering and quality management still live today. He created the PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check, Act ideology, the Deming 14 points of quality management. And he revolutionized how we think about processes, that quality is expected out of the customer. Joseph Duran then came around and he was another guru in quality management system. And he's highly esteemed for his practices in quality management, especially when it came to the role of automotive manufacturing. Bill Smith comes along working at Motorola in the late 80s. And he took all of these managerial practices and put it in play to create and coin the term Lean Six Sigma. Technically, that's a lie. It was called 4.5 Sigma back in the day. But what they found out is 4.5 Sigma was achievable and companies would stop there. Well, in Six Sigma, you can only have 3.4 defects out of a million opportunities. We talked about that defect percentage and the yield percentage, right? Having that same ratio done a million times and only having 3.4 defects is very hard to do, but it's doable. Some companies do it. Some's kind of sit around that 4.5 5 sigma range.
Yeah, I think like I know Motorola, they reached the Six Sigma, but like you said, 4.5 is the average. Even like the most like Intel and Boeing and like they haven't reached the Six Sigma yet. But yeah, I was fascinated by Motorola because they did achieve the Six Sigma. They closed down all their servicing facilities because it's cheaper for them to just send you a new phone than to service it for you.
Yeah, and you see that they went more outsourcing for that.
Yeah.
I also got probably one of the most pivotal figures in my life, and underrated, but Dr. Mirwan Mehta. I met Dr. Mehta during my undergrad, and you know that one professor in college where you're like, that dude knows some shit. That was that dude. He had worked under Edward Deming in the early 90s. I take a lot of his methodology and teaching to heart because he's what's created my whole career. Um, you guys get a chance, and if you're ever interested in facilitating Lean Six Sigma, this is the book. Process Excellence Using Lean Six Sigma and Excel. Dr. Mehta is a professor at East Carolina University. He was my chair during my time in grad school. But he really showed me how to use Lean Six Sigma in a practical way. And then when I went to the community college, I was an industry coordinator. And so I would coordinate and hire trainers to go teach in the industry. And, uh, he was the first person that showed me, like, hey, you're getting paid $43,000 at the community college. Let me show you this methodology and maybe you can use it to better your own career. Next thing you know, I'm going into a career. I'm making, I'm going into a career as a Lean Six Sigma practitioner and consultant. I'm making $200 an hour. And through time, that process grew. And like I said, I think I'm at like when I go into the industry, it's like $1,200 an hour now to teach. Um, and it wasn't just about the money, it was about the influence that he had in organizations. And he's still a tenured professor. We're actually starting a partnership in the next couple months where he's going to come and teach Lean Six Sigma to our audience. And the idea is to partner with the university on this. And then it would just turn into a donation for the college or the university. But having Dr. Mehta and his influence in my life changed my career directory. I just told you guys when in 2012 I got out of the Marines, I was homeless. I didn't know how to really function in society. I had joined at 17, and before that, I was in foster care. And so I didn't really know a whole lot about life. But then this man came into my life and he's like, dude, I see potential. I see where you're going. I see where you can go. And the whole reason you guys are in this program and learning these skills is because of that man right there. Well, I mean, because of me too, but like, I mean, he can't take all the credit, but like 60% of the credit is definitely on him. But I learned under him. I started going to industries with him and sitting through his green belt and black belt training. And all of a sudden, he's asking me to teach with him. And that's what started my whole career. He opened the doors for me. I went into economic development after I left the community college. And the uh, he still, whenever I had workforce questions or project questions, we would collaborate. We'd work together. And this dude never charged me a dime. He was just always there for me. You guys, I hope one day you're that mentor to somebody. And because of this man's influence in my life, I get to be the person that I needed when I transitioned, but for the military community. And I think a lot about him. He was just at my house Friday and he finally got to see the school and everything we do. And I finally got like whole that's so impressive. And hearing those words from my mentor after a couple years, it's incredible. But these pivotal figures are when we think of Lean Six Sigma today, it wouldn't be here without any of these people. Henry Ford's mass production, Walter Schwartz, statistical process control, Edward Deming's standardized management, Joseph Juran, Bill Smith, Dr. Mirwan Mehta. There's other people, you know, the father of scientific methods. You have Franklin, what's his name? Wawa. What's the guy's name? Franklin, father's Frederick Taylor. I'm about to type it up and I just brain fart. But Frederick Taylor is also in this group. Frederick Taylor is not as looked at fondly because he had a little bit of opinions instead of management experience. I mean, his management philosophy was very good, but he had a little bit of a personal side that's not as well respected in the community, so I don't include him. But he talked about standardization, forward thinking in an organization, simplifies making tasks simple for your workforce. So the power of these people carry on through you guys now. You know, all these teachings and all these managerial practices, this was put together. I like talking about Bill Smith because in the late 80s, what else also came around? Not just Lean Six Sigma, but all of a sudden you have the Project Management Institute with the PMBOK, the golden standard for project management philosophies. Well, guess where a lot of those practices came from? Lean Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma is one of the most, it's one of the greatest tools you can use as a manager to lead teams. But that's just one piece of the puzzle to be a leader. You know, there's other areas, and I'll talk about John Cotter. I'll talk about other industry leaders that are business executives throughout the week. But I really, really like how they set the stage for where we are today. I don't think we would have AI without continuous improvement. You know, if we didn't have the Hawthorne studies in the 50s ask workers about how do we improve in our workforce, we wouldn't have the improvements that we do today. You know, one of the Dr. Mehta is an incredible philosopher, and I built my career off him. And I want to I know I keep talking about it, but there's a book, Champion. I also have my book that's based heavily on his, and it's referenced in the book for our Champion book. But you know, a champion, all it is usually like an executive that is like a resource manager, allocating resources and putting strategic planning together. Edward Deming, another pivotal figure. I talk about the 14 points of quality management. creating the Plan, Do, Check, Act procedure. I've been in the military a little bit teaching, and they'll come around and they say, well, that's OODA loop. No, OODA loop is PDCA. So plan, do, check, act. Now you notice in some methodologies, it's plan, do, study, act. And that's because some may interpret it from the body of knowledge where essentially we don't want to just check the box. We want to study the improvement to make sure it takes effect. I talk about piloting that study and piloting that improvement on that way you can grow it on a bigger scale. Henry Ford, his production of Model T. He collaborated with Japan after World War II and led to creation of better quality management practices. I'll get a little bit back to him, but the most important thing is how he wasn't egotistic. You know, there was a lot of hatred towards Japan after World War II. He wasn't afraid to come in and say, okay, all right, that's in the past. How do we move forward and we collaborate and working better together? All of a sudden, they're sharing the same vendors. They're sharing the same technology. They're sharing their wisdom. And Toyota Production System really evolved because of this man and Takayama Kancho. Walter Shewhart, father of statistical process control, he worked at Bell Laboratories and he popularized the theory of normal distribution, which is basically saying if you throw 30 data points, it's going to, anything over 30 data points is going to start to form a normal distribution unless something's wrong with the process. These lean principles have gone throughout the years. They haven't changed much. The lean principles I want you to write down that stick with me the most is defining the value, going into an organization and understanding what's value, mapping that value stream, which we will do during value stream mapping day in the analyze phase. You create a flow with your process and establish pool. You know, the easiest way that I blend establishing pool is when you go to Subway and you're pulling that product through the assembly line. Like you're not going to Subway and that sandwich is already made. Establishing pool kind of ties into JIT, so just-in-time manufacturing. We'll dive into that as we go through. And then the pursuit of perfection. You know that old cartoon, the Roadrunner and Coyote, and the Coyote never caught the Roadrunner, but he did his best to try to land him. And the same thing here with pursuing perfection. Practicing and implementing and ingraining these Lean principles into your head kind of set the stage for how you do consulting. Going into a place that I have no idea about. One of the hardest places I ever had to go into was pharmaceuticals. I knew nothing about pharmaceuticals, but I defined the value, what the customer wants, mapping that process, finding defects along that process and areas we can improve in non-value added time, creating that flow of the organization and improving the process. I'm going to pause a little bit too. I'm a certified plant layout specialist too. So in my time in economic development, I would relocate companies to North Carolina and where their company was, and like one example was Wolf X-Ray. They manufactured, like when you go to the dentist and you have to wear that apron, that lead apron, they would manufacture that. And they were one of the world's leading sellers in it. Well, they relocated to North Carolina because of cost of living in New York. They were losing their profit and their overhead was really hard. They had already paid off their building, but essentially if you're paying a worker, $22 an hour, but you can pay them $16 an hour in North Carolina, that makes that tracks. I would do that as an organization too. And they even relocated their people down here. And the people that relocated, they kept their salary, but not everybody relocated down here. But the ones that did, they were paying them the same wage in North Carolina. I created the flow of their operation and I revamped their whole entire process. And we started from day one. We went through and looked at so in economic development, a lot of times counties will, and this kind of tie, this is where I'm trying to give you a holistic approach and not just talk about Lean Six Sigma, but talk about how these things apply. We would so like in economic development, counties and states will have shell buildings that they'll build for companies to relocate, and purpose is adding more jobs to the economy. And here in Pitt County, we relocated Wolf X-Ray. They wound up going to Rocky Mount. That's okay. It's still producing revenue for North Carolina. It wasn't a big deal. They were still hiring people from Pitt County to Rocky Mount, which is about 45 minutes. So we're still, getting those people jobs. Well, there was a shell building. Let me see if I can see it. In North Carolina that had there we go. You guys can see that little building right here. I think it's showing right. So Amazon put a bid on this building. This is the building that originally I was going to bring Wolf X-Ray into. They wound up relocating to Rocky Mount. But then Amazon had a bid to take over this building. Well, politics got involved. We had lost that bid to bring 500 jobs to the county over $125,000. Tell me that's not silly. 500 jobs. The county wanted Mr. Beast to be in that location because it was a big deal. He wound up hiring 10 people from the county and outsourced everybody else from North Carolina, outside of North Carolina. I wound up quitting that day because I thought it was silly. Why not drop 125,000 to bring 500 jobs to the county that have a salary over $65,000 a year? Over that. The county didn't see it that way. They wanted to have and that's where I kind of say, as you're doing continuous improvement projects, and I know this is going off into the economic development side, but politics are going to come into play. But if you showcase your data and what can happen and they still say no, it's time to pack up and go to another company. Half the economic team was fired after that. But Mr. Beast is still in that location today. So where I kind of go off on a side tangent there, but in my experience, I've been able to work with a lot of companies and not just Lean Six Sigma, but creating a better process flow. And, evidently, the county didn't see it that way, and that's okay. You're not always going to land every project, and I want you to know that. Failure is just the first attempt at learning. But if you bring data to the organization on why we need to change or why this is the better option, and they choose to go with more of a political answer, we got to hire this big celebrity, is not bringing jobs to the county. We got to hire this person, but they're not bringing any change to the organization. It's time to pack up and go. Would anybody argue that? How many times have you guys been a part of a process that you're trying to change it, but management says no? You guys ever had that problem?
Hello, military.
Right, you can't necessarily pack up and go. I got a boy, he works at he's out now. He was a gunny and he got out. But hold on.